So now let's turn our attention to Module 28. And specifically, we're going to look at language and thought. And as I get into this, I want you to be thinking a little bit about actually those two things. Is can we have language without thought, or could we have thought without language? And in some respects, I think generally people would say that we can have thought without language. We can see in pictures. Certainly kids that are younger certainly do. But can we have language without thought? I think you might have a tough time making that case, essentially. And language itself is essentially, as you can imagine, but I'm going to go ahead and define these things just for the sake of clarity, is really our way of combining words to communicate some kind of meaning. So language is our spoken, written, or signed words and the ways we combine them to essentially communicate meaning. And language really is the basis of all of our interactions with each other, even with ourselves. And so language is the basis of relationship, in one way to put it. And I'll just put relations for the sake of brevity. And it provides the context, it provides the structure, it provides the fabric of culture and relationships. We have a variety of cultures that are very oral-based cultures. When you go to, maybe you go on a missions trip, a lot of cultures are still oral-based cultures. We moved from an oral-based to a written-based culture quite a while ago, and essentially, as soon as mankind began to articulate, he began to find other ways to communicate using symbols, which essentially is what language is. We look at the letters themselves and say those are letters, but letters are symbols of something. And so essentially when we're talking about language and language structure itself, it can carry a lot of different kinds of meaning, like our little cartoon up here suggests in terms of the word gene. Is it a pair of pants or is it genetic? And so language structure itself, let's kind of break a few things down for you before we get too much further into this itself. Language structure has some key components. The first one is essentially morphemes, and some of these words are worth understanding. Morphemes are really the basic unit of that carry meaning in any language. So it's the basic unit. Often, in many cases at least, it is. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Let me back up here. We should be starting with phonemes. So I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. So phonemes are really the first thing that we need to look at, and it's the smallest distinctive sound unit of any language. And so to say bat, for example, you have three different phonemes, B, the ba, a, and t. They're not the same letters. Chat's the same way. It has a ch, a, t. And linguists surveying the various languages have come up with the idea that there's about 869 different phonemes in human speech alone, and no language ultimately uses them all. So in terms of English itself, we have about 40 units that are considered phonemes, and this is the same place that we use the word phonetic. Phonetics as a means of teaching language and teaching English was really built on how they actually sounded itself. So phonemes. Second one, which was the one I started with, is morphemes. And essentially, morphemes are the smallest unit that carries meaning. So smallest unit, and I'll just put meaning here. And so sometimes we can have phonemes and morphemes being the same. For example, the letter I can not only be a phoneme, but it also can be a pronoun and communicate a lot more. A is another one, for example. But we have other things like pre and preview and ed and adapted, or fixed would be another example of that. And then the last component part is grammar itself, which I'm sure a lot of you loathe the word because of some of the tests and exams you've had of late. Essentially, it's the system of rules that govern language and ultimately enables us to communicate with one another. And oftentimes this is the very stuff, essentially, of the grading that you get even in the writing that you do. But essentially, grammatic rules guide us to figure out meaning. And so they lead to something we might refer to as semantics. The meaning of words, and you'll notice that oftentimes we'll use that in other contexts, but semantics. And then the other part of that is syntax, which is, never mind the phone in the background, but the ordering of the words into sentences themselves is referred to as syntax. So those are the major component parts: phonemes, morphemes, grammar. Language has become increasingly complex. We have added words over the years. You even during the raging times of Harry Potter, when everybody was wild about Harry Potter, we've actually added words to the dictionary. Like, for example, muggle was one of those words that became so common that it got added to the dictionary itself. And ultimately, our language, these building blocks are very similar to the genetics of our language itself.